purpose for my life that's about more than just me. From grief to purpose. No, I am not my pain, and I'm telling you my journey of healing is gonna take me from grief to purpose. Turning my pain into purpose. From grief to purpose. Turning all my pain into purpose. From grief to purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to From Grief to Purpose podcast. On today, my guest today joining me is Donna Woolam, an elite certified life coach, business coach, and speaker with over 20 years of experience as the founder and CEO of Living at My Best LLC. She is dedicated to helping women step into their God-given calling through biblical principles of growth, confidence, and vision building. Donna empowers women to reclaim their hope, reignite their dreams, and reinvent their world. Now, outside of coaching, she is a writer. She is a ministry leader, a pastor, and a passionate advocate for advancing God's kingdom. So grateful to have her here on today. Donna, hi, how are you? Thank you for joining me today.
Hello, Menina. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you today.
You have been through a lot, but you're doing so many incredible things. And I was just excited about, not so much what you went through as far as your journey, but just to have you on to help inspire and educate others to, give them a little bit of, there's light, at the end of the tunnel. But before we get to, what you're doing now and how you got to this point in life, can we talk a little bit, but can you share about your journey as when you lost your husband and during that time, centered around that, what you went through and how you lost your husband?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share that story and to share his journey and our journey together. I was 17 years old when I met my Richard, and he was 24. We got married very soon after. I was crazy for him, and he was wild about me. He called me until the day of his passing, his bride, and he just loved me so beautifully. Now, that doesn't mean life was always wonderful and easy, but we just moved through that. We'd been married quite a long time, and in 2012, he was not feeling well. He was working. He came home. He said, something's really wrong with my arm. I need to go to the emergency room, which I knew was serious because, listen, he was not a man to ever go to the doctor if he didn't have to. And as we sat there in the emergency room, the hospitaler came in with tears in her eyes, and she said, Mr. Woolam, I'm afraid to tell you, it looks like you have cancer and a tumor has broken your arm. And that was the beginning of an 8-year journey of seeing doctors and all kinds of things. Richard was not ever a person who was disappointed or depressed, or he was just so even-tempered. And when the doctors told him that he had multiple myeloma, which is a bone cancer, a plasma bone cancer, he had no idea that actually meant cancer. And so out in the car after the appointment, we had a conversation about that. And he just said, well, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And that was his attitude throughout. With a broken right arm, he had to do therapy. We had to go through all of the process of going to doctors. He didn't have regular doctors. He went through that. So much grace in the doctors that took care of him. They loved him and treated him well. He appreciated what they were doing. And in the process of identifying what all was going on in his body, they discovered that in his kidney, one of his kidneys was also a tumor. They thought it might be multiple myeloma, though that was very rare. Later on, it was discovered that it was renal cell carcinoma. And he might have been carrying that for a long time, and it would have never been found until it was too late, because that's how renal cell carcinoma usually is. But he went through the treatment. It was intense. And we lived in Central Texas, West Texas, in Midland, and his doctor's treatment was in Dallas. So we ended up moving ourselves temporarily into hotel rooms and hospital rooms, and he would have treatment, and we would go home, and he would get sick again, and we would go back to Dallas. And we did that for so many months until we decided in 2014 that we just couldn't do that any longer. And we moved to a little place called Ennis, Texas. And all through that time, the challenge, Menina, was that it wasn't just the cancer, but also all of the side effects that go along with that.
Yeah.
And so the chemotherapy created all of these issues that he dealt with continually: chronic pain, neuropathy. If anybody deals with neuropathy, you know how painful that is. He developed very strange infections that people don't get unless they're down in the jungles of Brazil, all these weird things. And they created challenge after challenge after challenge. He had septic shock and had to be airlifted from our home in Midland to Dallas. They really didn't expect him to live. In fact, the doctors in Midland said he has a DNR. Do you want to honor that? And that was a huge shock, because in all of the cancer treatment, we'd not had anyone ask us that question. But God restored him and revived him and all of that great stuff. So we just continued in that. He never, once he had a stem cell transplant, which is called an autologous stem cell transplant, where they take your own stem cells, treat them, and put them back in, then he never battled multiple myeloma again. He just had to battle and move through the challenges of treatment. But in 2018, he started having some pain in his lower back, and it was discovered that even though they'd removed the kidney, the renal cell carcinoma had metastasized into his spine. And from 2018 until 2020, he underwent surgeries and treatments and complications and all of that with that tumor in his spine. And in July of 2020, almost exactly 8 years to the day when we discovered he had cancer, he flew into the arms of Jesus. And one of the things that I will remember all the days of my life is he was kind of going into the end of life, restful sleep, coma. I could arouse him a little, and I kind of shook him. I'm not shook him. I didn't shake him, but I put my hands on him. He woke up, and I said, "Honey, I think you're trying to go to heaven. I think you're trying to go to Jesus." And he just began to weep. And I just like, "Honey, what? Why are you crying?" And he said, "Because I'm sad for you." His very last words to me were words of him carrying and caring for me. And that was just the beautiful man that he was. And so now, actually, as we're recording this, my anniversary is February 17th. So I will be celebrating another anniversary without my Richard. We'd been married 42 years. And so life has just been different, obviously, since then, about loving someone your whole adult life and then learning to live without him. So that, in a nutshell, even though it's a big nutshell, that's a bit about our journey.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, 42 years is, those kind of marriages you don't hear about anymore. Something I know I'm striving for in life. And, you were 17, he was 24, you were dating an older man.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
But, you said he loved you some, and his last words were, when you said, he said, "I'm concerned about you. I'm sad for you." Miss Donna, I was like, I know I told you, because you all have allergies. I'm like, you have me about to cry over here. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
We're just getting started. So I don't, but that's something. I'm just wondering like how, like during the time as he's your husband, Richard, as Richard is transitioning or even in the middle of, because, cancer is a very scary disease. As I shared before, my mother passed from breast cancer, but to watch your loved one go through all of the ups and downs when they have a cancer, how did you, I know you are his wife, but you are also wearing, other hats as well. And, how did you, keep yourself together? But I know you were probably trying to keep him encouraged as well during the process. How did you do that? And what did you do? If you can
Well,
share.
the primary thing always was my relationship with the Lord and staying in the Word and staying in prayer. And we were so far away from all of our family and friends, but I discovered this community on Facebook. I would try to post these little messages about what was going on and about the encouragement that we'd received. And people from all over were praying for us and thinking of us. And I had a long lost friend who had moved to the Dallas area. She found out we were at the Baylor Hospital in Dallas, and she would come and pick me up at the hospital and take me to lunch. Oh. And those kind of beautiful things. I had friends who brought our car from Midland when we were air flighted. We had other friends who would come through and see us. Those were rare occasions, but they were those little touches of what we say God's love with skin on, where he just loved us and nurtured us. I watched a lot of TV on my computer. I will say that. And I probably became Candy Crush's number 1 subscriber. I don't know how much Candy Crush I played, but it was a lot. And those were the hospital days. But after he got out of the hospital, and I really began to think, well, what am I going to do now? I've always was a woman who had a business. I was doing work. What am I going to do now? What is the plan for the future? Because we were looking forward to what would happen after he was healed, because that was always our prayer and always our hope.
Yeah.
And I learned that what was most important was to look at all of the things that I had come through, learned, done in my past, and ask the question, how can these be gathered together to create something for the future? And that was when I created a system I called the Heart Code, so that we can grab those kind of things. But I took some coaching certification courses in that. I took some public speaking courses in all of that. And after we moved to Ennis and we were in our home, Richard would be on the couch. He'd be playing games or watching TV or any number of things, maybe playing with our little dog. And I sat down and wrote my very first book in that time, and then wrote some other books based on leadership. And so what I learned there is that if you are willing to listen to what the Lord wants to do with you, you can scoop up all of these things that are painful and scary and fear creating and turn them into beautiful things. If you will just let yourself be unstuck from the fear and just put yourself into the hands of the Lord. It didn't mean that bad things weren't happening around us. It didn't mean that scary things weren't going on and that we wondered how we were going to move from this place to the other. But it was really about the Lord and listening to him tell me, this is what I want you to do with everything that you've been going through. And those were the most important moments in that particular season.
Mm. So with you being a woman of faith, a believer, how did you reconcile the first time, Richard was healed, the second time it was time for him to go home to be with the Lord. Did you have any, as we speak practically, really, it's, real emotions. We're human. Yeah. We discuss, as a grief support coach. And if you know about grief, everyone you go through those, sometimes denial, anger, shock, all the little, all the stages, right? Yeah. So did you go through any of that, or were you just, okay, accepting immediately, like, this is what it is?
No, I did not.
Thank you for your honesty.
I really, in the early stages, Nina, I had to battle a lot of grief before there was grief. And I think we don't talk about that often enough when you're taking care of someone with a terminal, chronic illness, whatever you want to call that. And so it wasn't about so much being afraid that he would die, but his health was so poor. And he went from a robust guy. We had a beautiful, loving relationship, and he could barely walk. So there was a lot of intimacy that left our relationship, just to be really honest. And so there was grieving about that and what life was going to be like without that, or would that ever return? He became completely dependent on me, not in a bad way, but he just so completely trusted me to take care of him. And so I felt that weight on me in a different kind of way. And anyone who's had that sole responsibility of caregiving understands that. Things that were going on in our life where he could not walk. So we didn't have a wheelchair, and I had to put him on one of those push walkers on the seats and push him up the sidewalk into the apartment where we were staying. I had to unload all of the car and bring whatever we had with us. Had to put him in the car, take him in the wheelchair at the hospital, move around, all of that kind of stuff. It was one of those things that when I look back on it now, I think there's no way. How could I ever do that now? And I really felt the Lord say, you don't need to do that now, Donna. I gave you grace in the moment. But there was one particular time when I was just so covered up and just saying, Lord, how are we going to do this? How are we going to manage this? When I was a young girl before Richard, one of the things that I remember praying, I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and, drama of a 12, 13-year-old girl, and crying out to God. And I saw a mockingbird at that time. And so for the rest of my life, mockingbirds have been a sign of God's presence with me. And I would see them from time to time. And I was in that courtyard of those apartments, was loaded down with everything. And I said, Lord, how am I going to do this? I just don't know how I'm going to do this. And then I looked up, and the entire courtyard was filled with mockingbirds.
Wow.
And it was just as if the Lord says, you are not doing this alone, Donna. No matter what happens, I'm with you. Now, our faith was to pray and believe for healing, to confess the word of God over him. We believe that Jesus is the healer, that's part of what happened when he died. He died on the cross for our healing, for complete healing. And so that was our belief. And we managed through that. We just, whenever we would be afraid, we would just pray and we would talk to the Lord about it. But there was this sense, even though we'd walked through so many things and the Lord had delivered him out of them and he had met our needs in so many ways, there was a sense when this turn happened, there was this place in me that just knew that the days written for Richard's life on the earth were coming to an end. And even though I didn't like that, and Richard didn't believe that, he truly believed that God would raise him up and we would go all over the world talking about the healing power of God and declare and testify to that. But there was this place in me that just knew that there was a turning. This was different than anything it had ever been before. And so I just had to let myself get into the presence of the Lord and manage that. And I spent a lot of time in the bathtub crying when Richard was in the living room and saying, Lord, you'll just have to help me. If you're not going to heal him and raise him up, then let him go home to you peacefully. And it was not easy. It was not easy.
Thank you for your transparency and sharing. And I'm so thankful that you had your faith, during that time. I think it makes a difference because, I know the difference, when we didn't grow up, as a Christian household like that. But when I came to know the Lord for myself, you have that comparison though, like, oh, this is what it is over here. Oh, and this is what it is. Yeah. What it is over here on this side of the neighborhood. So there's that difference. And so I'm so thankful that you had your faith during that time. And thank you for your transparency, because a lot of times we don't talk about that part Like you can, have your faith, but you're still going to have those moments where you might need to go to the closet and cry it out, and pop back out like, okay, I'm ready.
A friend of mine who had gone through something similar and she found out about Richard called me and said, Donna, I have the best piece of advice for you. And I'm like, oh, this can be some, fabulous practice. She said, get in the car, go for a drive and scream as loud as you can until you can't scream anymore and get all of that emotion up out of you. And I have to tell you, I did some screaming in the car in the early days. So people probably wondered, what in the world is that woman doing in her car? But,
it helps. I mean, it helps. I've been there myself, but it's real. It's like sometimes words just really cannot express, what your emotions really need to do. And like your friend said, you need to get in that car and, just scream, and, you may not even understand. I mean, you, of course, feel it, but, I believe that God understands that scream.
Oh, yeah.
He understands exactly what that scream means, where it's coming from, what it's for, so it's just necessary to express your emotions, and that's coming from someone, who's, my family didn't emotionalize, like, in a healthy way. We express things differently, but as I'm learning now, now through that journey, that your Richard passed away in, 2020. Okay. And now you also lost your mother as well, correct? And what year, how far apart was that, when you lost your mother?
They were about 2.5 years. My mom passed right around her birthday. My sister, they called us. She'd been ill for quite a while. And, that was a really hard time. And there were so many days after Richard died because my dad had passed away several years earlier. All I wanted in the world was to talk to my mother about how you survive after the person that you've loved your whole life dies.
Yeah.
And so that was such a difficult loss upon loss is what it felt like. It's just like, my mom is gone. Richard was actually pretty well at that time and was able to go and be with me and stay with me at my mom's. My sister and I were able to sit with my mom at her bedside and sing her favorite songs and talk to her about memories. And yes, she passed away and it was very quiet and peaceful. And I was so, so thankful for that for my mom's sake, because this was a prayer that my mom had, or a fear that she had and a prayer that she prayed. She was so afraid that she would die alone. And for the Lord to allow my sister and I to be with her was an answered prayer for her. And even though it's been hard and I miss her, I'm so thankful that even in that deeply sorrowful time, I knew that the Lord was still working and that he was making things happen and answering prayers for my mother that she didn't even realize maybe were even being answered in that moment. Although I do know that the spirit man is aware and alert and paying attention. I had a severe illness, was on a respirator for 10 days, died twice while being on that respirator. And during that time, the presence of the Lord was so real and so strong. So I know that even as my mom was passing, as Richard was passing, that the Lord was present and they were comforted and near to the Lord, and they knew that people around them loved them.
Wow. I mean, it's, even though, to me, it just feels like when you experience loss and the years could be 2 years apart, 3 years apart, 5 years apart. Sometimes it feels back to back when that connection with that person is, very deep and extensive. Like, of course, your mother, that's a relationship you've had for years, because she birthed you, and then your husband, 42 years is a very long time. So I always try to encourage people not to, if they know someone that has lost someone, not to say, well, you should be okay. Like, it's been a year now, it's been 2 years, kind of that, get over it type of, non-empathetic communication.
Right.
Because you just can't get over someone. And like, with you and Richard, it was 42 years, like, so you guys are like intertwined.
Yeah.
That's a lot to unpack. But with you and with the loss of Richard, and your mother's name was
Madge.
Madge. Okay. With the loss of Richard and Madge, how did you process your grief? Like, what were some of the steps outside of like, taking courses, or was that helpful for you, the life coaching and becoming a speaker? What pushed you and propelled you towards, as we're working towards, that greater purpose now that, God has obviously called you to now?
Well, and I am so thankful that in those in between days when I had a lot of time to sit, that I did something with those days.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be my personality, just the way that God made me. But he's made me a forward-looking person, which I can say when Richard received his diagnosis, I tell people that it was like the entire future just went black. And so for someone who had always been a dreamer, and then there's just like nothing out there in front of you, that was a shock to me, which is why I talk about reclaiming your hopes and reigniting your dreams, because that's exactly what had to happen for me. I had to go back to the place of, okay, who am I alongside of this, but also outside of this? This is part of my life. It's not the whole of my life. It's not the identity of my life. Even as being a married woman, one of the things Richard said was the best thing for him is when I finally realized he could not meet every need of mine, that I had to be able to survive. He met particular needs that a husband is supposed to meet, that he's ordained to meet, but he could not be the source of everything for me and all of my confidence and all of my ability. It was too much weight for him. It's too much weight for any person to be the sole source for someone else. So I had learned that early and had to go back to that. And I remember when I published the first book and ordered a copy, and it came in, and Richard bought me flowers, sat on the couch, bought me flowers, beautiful bouquet. And he said, "You're finally becoming the person you have always meant to be." Aww. And so being able to carry that kind of confidence with me into this future of now, what does life look like on the other side? I'm so thankful that in those days I processed some of that. And I can tell you, it was hard. After my mom passed, I sat for days and days and days in a chair, just crying and missing her, because she was my mom.
Yeah.
I just missed her. I loved her. I missed her. And then when Richard died, and even though, big, strong, spiritual giant Donna, it was what I think people thought, I spent hours and hours at home. I'd find myself in my chair with almost dawn to dusk, and it would be dark in the house, and I didn't care. And I would walk around the house dragging my feet, and I would just stop and say, "Okay, pick up your feet and walk. Don't just shuffle through. Pick up your feet and walk. You have to live. You must live." And I could be fixing myself something to eat, and I would just get so sad that I wasn't fixing something for Richard, and I would stand at the stove and cry. I would go to bed and sleep on his side of the bed and cry. There was so much of that. And, you don't just get through grief. I think that this idea, well, you're going to get through it. No, you don't ever get through it, because grief for a person that you love, that person is supposed to be there and they're not. And I remember Dr. Caroline Leaf, who has done so much in neuroscience, talked about the physical aspect of pain, because she says we have neural pathways and memories, and we think, so for instance, Richard liked fresh cherries. And so whenever I think about fresh cherries, then the next place in that is to take them to Richard. But that line is cut off, and the brain and the body hit up against that place that is no longer there. And the body takes that, and it is physical pain within us. So with time, some of that fades away. But I can tell you, as I'm facing another anniversary without Richard, I'm sad and I'm missing him and I'm thinking about him. And listen, this is a guy who wasn't the most romantic about Valentine's Day or anniversaries. He bought me a rose a wooden rose one time. You said, I got you this because you don't ever need to have another one. So it's not even that he was so romantic about things, but my heart still runs to him in those moments. But over the span of time, it's just really people loving me. And, I can say that in my emotions, Nina, I did some silly things and I made some silly mistakes and I made some silly choices because my emotions were up here. Even though I'm a person who is pretty controlled in my emotions, those overarching emotions covered everything. And so it's really easy to be annoyed at things and to make quick judgments. And I regret those now. I regret the people that loved me and somehow in the wake of my pain, I caused them pain. And all I can do is repent. I've asked their forgiveness and you try to move forward. But there were people, I ended up at a new church, Menina, and I want to recommend this. Like, you have been so lovingly generous to ask my mom's name and my husband's name. I was going to church with a new woman and she said, let's go to coffee. I want you to tell me about Richard. And she just said, I want to know about this man that you love. And it was one of the most beautiful gifts I've ever received post grief, I think. Someone who had no idea about my Richard, but wanted to know all about him because she cared about me. So it was just a beautiful thing. I know I'm all over the place, but I just want to say that in that post immediacy of the death of my husband, I just did the best that I could. Just made the best decisions that I knew how. I knew that I wasn't supposed to make any life-altering, buying big things or selling big things decisions. So I knew that I wasn't supposed to do that. But I just did the very best that I could and allowed God to heal my heart and for people to come to me. And as I began to wake up a little bit out of the immediacy of that, I had to think about what was next. And that's when I decided I did a little bit of anxiety coaching for women. I thought, I will coach women who are widows. And I decided quickly that's not really what I was called to do. Not really, but I can help with some anxiety stuff. And then about confidence. And so as my coaching business evolved again and woke up again, then it was about creating confidence and then about helping women to understand who God had made them to be. And I was given the opportunity to speak at a couple of conferences about how to identify your heart code and how God had made you. And in this season where he has brought me to, because last year I had another grief-inducing situation that had nothing to do with the loss, the death of a person, but the death of a situation that caused so much pain and grief. And on the other side, even of that, in this past year, the Lord just spoke to me about, Donna, you're on a journey and people are on a journey. And so it's the journey to wholeness and being redeemed and restored by what God has done and helping people still to reclaim those hopes and dreams, but to reinvent that world where we tear off what the enemy says about us. We refuse to wear garments that no longer fit us. We don't allow the lies of the enemy or the interpretations of our life of other people who don't really know us. We don't let them define us. We let God define us, and we take that journey and we begin to become whole. And I heard someone say that you can't afford to have one thought in your head about yourself that God doesn't have about you. And then also that in these places where we're walking, it's just so critically important to know that God is for us and that he is leading us and he is guiding us and he has a million good thoughts about us every single day. And so become the person. Jesus paid for so much for us and we live so below what he paid for. So my prayer, the mission of my life now is to help women identify that and walk in that and begin to fill out a life of purpose and passion for themselves.
Wow. I love that. First of all, shout out to Richard because I love the wooden rose idea. I feel like that's kind of smart. But he was like, no, 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 no. You're not going to get me every Valentine's Day. No, no, no.
He
Like,
did relent. And our anniversary, the 17th, and of course, Valentine's Day, the 14th. And so he would usually buy me flowers in between for both holidays. So if he was going to buy me flowers, I was going to get him some time around there for both. And then he just became a person who sent them to me on very, very special occasions. So
that's what it's about.
that one was, yeah. I'm telling you, he did not win point with me for that one. It was like, you're what?
Like, wait a minute, wait a second.
Wait a minute.
Oh, and then the other, I feel like the important, one of the important takeaways, because you said a lot of, there's a lot of depth in what you just said, but is that, you did the best that you can do. Because I feel like we feel sometimes, that we have to be these perfect people in every situation, as it relates. I don't know how you can be perfect when you lose somebody or when you're going through a very grievous situation. And especially, I've, been caught up in the, idealism of myself as it relates to, being a believer and how I'm supposed to present myself to God and knowing he sees everything, like he sees everything. Like,
Absolutely.
And so it's just like, you have to be comfortable with just be yourself, especially because there's all types of grieving, detail, in the Bible, like and how they grieved and how, so it's like, God is like, it's okay, take a moment. So as you mentioned, if you need to have that time where you sat and you're in your living room, you don't want to talk to anybody right now. You just, whatever, if however you're process, it through, because I think it's unhealthy. It can be unhealthy when you just don't do anything. Like, you kind of, you have a sense of delayed grief, I believe, because sometimes, delayed grief is you don't even know it's delayed. I definitely experienced some of that. But then there's that purposeful, I'm going to make myself so busy. Like, I don't want to even think about what just happened. So I definitely, just think it's important just to, like you said, you just show up for your process and just do the best that you can do in that moment, for yourself. As we, you mentioned, and I was, of course, looking into a bit of how you coach and how you show up for other people, that there are places in God you cannot know until you've walked through pain and grief. Can you share a moment when you felt that deeper connection as you were transitioning? Because sometimes, and then when I say transitioning, I mean from, the place where you were, you had, lost your husband, lost your mother, how do we get to that connection, with God and maintaining it as a strong connection and not, being like, what, Lord, I don't know what you're doing, like who wrote this script? Like, cause I did not get the, memo on all this stuff, who approved?
I like that. I like it. I didn't get the revision. I don't know what happened. I thought it was going this way and now it's this way.
Right.
I didn't get that revision. So, absolutely. I love that you asked me that question because it's one of the foundations of my life now is that no matter what you're going through, if it's great or if it's the worst thing you've ever gone through, that there is a piece of the nature and character of God that if you're willing to just rest in that, if you're ready and willing to sit in that, there's places in him that he wants to reveal to us that we cannot know until we go through something. And I can't remember where the scripture is. It says, but we've heard of you, but now I've seen you with my eyes. Oh, it's Job. He's talking about, I've heard of all of this, but now I've seen it with my very own eyes. And so for me, I'd been a Christian for quite a while. And I'll just say in the early days of when Richard and I were married, we were not in church. It was like 10 years of the first part of our marriage before we were consistently in church. But there, in this place of reading scripture, and here's all this weird stuff, these good and acceptable religion is taking care of widows and orphans. And I thought, of all the things the Lord could ask us to do, why is this the good and acceptable thing? I thought, oh, because they're helpless or they're whatever. But here I am. My mom is gone. Richard's parents are gone. My mom and dad are gone. And now Richard is gone. And so I found myself in this place of being at my age, a widow and an orphan.
Mm.
And what the Lord revealed about who he is in that and how he takes care of widows. And we can see that all through scripture, and how he lovingly has taken care of me, how he has supported me, how he's given me favor in areas that are just incredible opportunities that he's opened doors for me, and how he has come and I'm not saying physically, but how he's come and sat with me in my grief and in my sorrow and in my longing, that I would never have known that. I mean, as a married woman, I can read the scripture. It says, oh, he is my husband. But until your earthly husband is gone and he is your husband, you don't know what that looks like until you don't have a mom or a dad to go to say, I need your help. I need advice. What do I do? And he comes and he beautifully fathers you. And we know that he does that anyway, but there is a depth to it that if you haven't experienced it, you just don't know. And I say often, I would have my Richard back in a moment. If I could have my way for me, not for him, because I know he's in a great place and he's doing fine. For me, if I could sit with him, with my Richard, and put my head on his shoulder and talk to him about the day, I would do that.
Yeah.
I would love that, but I would not want to trade either what I have discovered about the Lord in these seasons. And just one other piece that's kind of not with the Richard and my mom story, but it is a grief place, that with this situation that I was in last year, where the position that I was in left, and I had to really deal with what I have interpreted as betrayal of my friendship and of my love for a person in a ministry, and trying to figure out that and walking that out and the grief of that. Then what I've learned is how Jesus has dealt with the grief of betrayal. He did, and how he continued to love, and how he continued to serve, and how he looked through all of that to you and me and everyone else listening today in order to redeem us. And so if we're willing, we can learn a lot about the Lord in the very most difficult places of our life.
Wow, you definitely can. Wow. Even when you don't want to, because sometimes, I think we all have those moments where we're like, oh, you don't feel like going through this.
I'm not feeling it today, Lord. Thanks.
Be on this sign-up sheet, because I did not want I did not want to volunteer for this. What is going on? But honestly, what you're saying, you do definitely have to experience some things in order to, get closer, to God, or to get to where God wants you to be, in life, outside of your own personal plans. It's like God has a, totally another set of plans for you that you may not even know about. But honestly, in full transparency for myself, I honestly don't believe, maybe later, but I don't honestly think that if my mother had not passed away, and I'm not saying that God, ended her life, or, I don't, put cancer on her. I don't, all that stuff is above me, above my head, and she left the earth, because at the time I was 17, but I don't believe that I probably would have came to the Lord, when I did, or if I would have, I don't know. I'm saying, I don't know, of course God knows. But if she hadn't have passed when she passed, so I definitely sometimes reflect and look back over the timeline and be like, oh, okay, this movie is kind of making sense, but I still don't like the, the way it was written type of thing. But I do believe that, just going through all of that, is what I'm saying in context, going through, all of those, circumstances, pushed me, to, be drawn towards, the Lord's direction. So I can honestly, resonate with that. And because sometimes you just don't want to go through those pain points, but they do, form those deep, connections, with God. So now, as far as the business and, rebuilding and being a life coach, and, rebuilding a business after loss, because sometimes it's very hard to even motivate yourself to want to do something, let alone give back to others. So it definitely, has to be, an act of God, like drew you to do, something, outside of yourself. But with dealing with that like type of loss, it must have required, I always say God's strength, but your own personal strength too. What was the hardest part for you as far as like trusting God with your next steps, both in life and in business?
Wow, that's a powerful question. What I think that there was a part of me that didn't have a choice.
Mm.
I mean, I could have gone and done some different things, and I kind of looked out at that. But listen, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I don't like working for other people.
Me neither.
I really enjoy my own schedule. I mean, I have in the ensuing years, I have worked for other people. I've worked on their timetable, and it's always, okay, how can I turn this into a contract position so that I can go back home when I want to?
Yeah.
So part of my nature and my character is that's just what I love. But and I could have done all kinds of things. I could have done any number of things as far as working for others or working for myself. But I experienced the transformational power of coaching in my early entrepreneurial life. And honestly, it transformed me. And it wasn't just a matter of, oh, if I do these things, I'll have a better business. But it began to tap into the places in my life that were holding me back from becoming everything that I knew was inside of me. And as I just in community and relationship with others, I just knew that if I could help communicate that to others, and I really equate it to almost like a high performance coaching, Menina, because high performance coaching and life coaching, it deals with every aspect of our life. It's this holistic kind of thing, because you can't be super successful in business if you've got all these mindset blocks down over here. And you can't have the most loving relationships with others if you don't feel confident and good about who you are. So it's all of these pieces that as we begin to pay attention to our heart, our mind, our spirit, our body, our emotions, all of that kind of stuff, that I knew that if there was anything that the Lord had gifted me in, there was two different things. One is speaking and teaching, preaching the word of God, which I would do every day, all day, and nobody would have to pay me. But don't tell anybody that. So, and working with women one-on-one. And I know that we live in this society of, just do a really cheap course and do a group coaching program and all of that. But I love being in the trenches with a woman and hearing her make that transformational click that moves everything forward for her, even 1 or 2 degrees. And because I'd experienced that myself, I knew that I wanted to be able to do that. The business side of that is making yourself get up off the couch and go in and do the work, because it's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You're dealing with all of your own mind junk. You're not feeling good. Your heart is broken. Your heart is sad. You want to make sure that the messages that you're communicating are uplifting and loving and powerful, and not, it's such a crappy day. So, managing and marshaling the business side of it was tough. Put myself in the hands of good people who could coach me and help me in that and give me direction as I was kind of wobbly and insecure. So I knew the value of it. I knew that I wanted to do it, but I also knew that I was going to have some help on it too.
I love that. And definitely too, like on the business aspect of it, we all have our days, where we're like, I'm not feeling it. I don't feel like it. I can recall there was a time I was doing, thought I was done, doing some work, with the business. I think I was editing something, and it was late. I put the computer up. I was done. I think it was past 11 o'clock at night. But I had some like small things that needed to be worked on. So I was like, I'll get up early in the morning and do it the next day. And then the Lord spoke so lovingly, so softly. And he was like, a real good business person that was really about their business would just get up and knock it out right now. And then you don't have to worry about it in the morning. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like, let me just, get up, making me feel all bad.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
truth be told, but that's that little encouragement too. I feel
Yeah.
like, that, the Holy Spirit just kind of nudges you along there. Like, come on, we got work to do.
Yeah. And if you're a student of the word, and he talks about being a person of excellence, he talks about being a woman of excellence. He talks about, I think, go to the end, oh sluggard, right? Like that. I was like, I want to just sit here and not do anything. And you're telling me to go ahead and do this. But this is the thing, is that he delights in our success and prosperity. And he has given us the wisdom inside of us to be able to do that, to serve him and serve others. And if we will yield in that, it transforms other people's lives, and it transforms us in the same process.
That's so true. That's so true. And definitely, we don't want to hold up anybody else's blessing, if it's coming, with our assistance, that's so true. Now, with you spent over 20 years helping women reclaim hope and, to reignite their dreams. What has the journey of inspiring others taught you about the resilience of, the human spirit? Like, what have you seen with the different women that you've coached, especially in the face of their loss and hardship, and overcoming something?
I have learned that there is a season when your heart is most open and receptive. I mean, I make a very clear definition. I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I don't have the training for that, even though I may have some intuition about that or some experience in that area. Counseling and therapy is powerful and necessary and needed. And a lot of times people will come to a coach and want counseling and therapy. And I just tell them that I can't help you with that piece of it. I can love you and I can pray for you and we can talk about things. But what I do is to help you move forward from whatever it is that's holding you in this moment. And so being able to, in integrity, and I didn't know that in the beginning. I actually was coaching someone and realized in the middle of our coaching contract that, wow, she doesn't need me. She needs a counselor or a therapist to help her. And at that time, I didn't really know where to direct her. And now I do, because once you go through something, you learn something, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And so I try to make sure that I am actually helping a person at the place where they're ready to move forward from where they've been. And we can all get stale and stuck. I call stale, stuck, and stagnant in our progress. Life can just begin to weigh us down. It's like that book that you love, that you read 10 times and then you put on the shelf that you want to read again, but it's all covered with dirt and dust. And so I help women be able to take those things that God's put inside of them and dust those off and look at them and see if they're still appropriate for where they want to go. And if it's not, how do we use their life experiences to help them move forward? And if it is, it's like, okay, where did you get stuck? What happened? What did you believe that maybe wasn't true that made you believe that you had to stop what you were doing, or what was the life situation that you were going through? So yeah, it takes wisdom to be able to know that, but you just have to be ready for the next step.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad you shared that too, because there's, with your experience, you definitely see a lot and deal with a lot with your clients. But it's definitely important to understand the time too when, there's a difference between they need coaching and they need counseling, therapy. Like this might be something medical, clinical wise that they need to actually walk through, with a therapist or counselor. So that's definitely, it comes with experience. So like you said, you got to and then, training. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, if we can just get into a little bit before we close out about your business and your, all that you have to offer as a life coach and a speaker, and where we can find you on your website. If someone wanted to, I'm sorry. Look, am I apologizing to the mic? I am. But if we, where we can find you, just tell tell us a little bit more about what you do, what you offer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I do have a lot of courses I've created, little short courses, mini courses and workshops from 45 minutes to 4 hours long. So those are available. And I have some free courses on my website. It's donnawoolam.com, donnawoolam.com. If you go there, you can find everything else that I do. You can find the links to my courses, about the coaching that I'll do, and I'll tell a bit more about that in a few moments, about how to hire me as a speaker or to invite me to come and speak to your small group or large group, and the links for where to get my books, which are all on Amazon. I do have a book for women in business and leadership from a woman's perspective and point of view, as well as some mindset helps, a renewed mind design journal. I just created a high performance planner for Christian women that helps with a day and evening meditation and journey, and then planning. And it goes all through my Journey to Wholeness Reframe, which is a system that I use. And that is based on 4 different pillars. One of those, the first one is the reasoning box, how we all carry all of these reasons about why we are. We carry the past, we carry our present, we carry our suppositions about people and about life. And those are all in the reasoning box, and how we need revelation, which is the revelation switch, something that comes in and gives us a bit of a kick and helps us to know. And I mean a kick start, not a kick, both though. Sometimes let's get real. We need to get in the pants, right? We need to kick. So the revelation switch, where we can come out of that reasoning and our predisposed ways of thinking about life and have some light come into that. Then the response matrix, about how you can learn to make better decisions so that you can feel peaceful about that and make decisions that make sense for your life. And then all the way over into the results awakening, because the truth is, if you want something different, you have to do something different. And you don't ever do anything different until you think something different. The core of who I am is Romans 12:2, which is be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because I truly believe if you can think a new thought that tears down a destroying thought, you can have an entirely new life just by having a new thought about that. So that's where my coaching model is. There's information on that. I've got lots of blog posts and YouTube videos about that there. I also do a podcast called the Reinvent Your World podcast, and you can find me on Apple and Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, and the links on my website too. I'm in social media. I don't do TikTok, but I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and Pinterest. And I do have a free group on Facebook. It's the Christian Journey to Wholeness Facebook group. And I would just love to welcome anyone who wants to join us there.
Oh, wonderful. That's so beautiful. And all of Donna's information is going to be in the description. So be sure to go and visit her website, donnawoolam.com. And then I always ask Miss Donna, I always say, Miss Donna, for those that have many years before me, because I'm still learning this life here, but I feel like you have so much wisdom. I'm still learning, and half the time I feel like, am I learning anything? I don't know. But if you could leave just something encouraging, maybe to someone that has been in your shoes, is going through it now, loss of a spouse, be it male or female, and then just trying to figure out, what do I do next? Like, if you could leave a word of encouragement, you can a prayer, something, however you feel led, if you can just leave something for them before we go off.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I do want to encourage you that all of us are on a journey. The Bible says that we're on a pilgrimage, and we are looking for our final home, our eternal home. And along all of that path are all of these experiences that we have that are beautiful and life-giving and life-building, and these other circumstances that just feel like they're going to tear us apart. And even Psalm 23 talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. It just feels like everything around us is dark and scary and disappointing. But this is also what it says in Psalm 23, that the Lord restores our soul. And in that moment, I love to take words apart just a little bit, restore. So whatever has been pulled away from us, whatever has dripped away in our tears, or maybe someone has come in and we feel like that they've stolen the path that we were supposed to be on, or the help. God is in the business of going in and restoring us and renewing us and bringing us forward. And so my encouragement is don't quit. Don't quit. Just stay on the path. The light is there for you for the day that you're in. Trust that there is help and hope and instruction for you. Just keep moving. And even on the days when you feel like I just can't today, that's okay if you have a day that's like that. But do one thing that gives you life, one thing that gives you hope. Reach out to one person that you know loves you. Sometimes we feel like there's no one in the world who knows us and loves us, but there is someone who does. And if you know that person, reach out to them. But don't quit. Just keep moving and keep trusting. It's not about coming up to the edge of the trial or the test or the situation. It is about moving and looking beyond that. Jesus said that for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And sometimes we just have to endure horrible death-dealing situations, but we just don't stop there. We just keep moving forward. And so in those moments, I just want to encourage you to cry out to the Lord and say, Lord, I need to feel you in a way that I haven't felt you in a really long time. And I would just even pray that over you right now, that the presence of the Most High God would come on you and around you, that you would feel the love of the Lord, you would feel the peace of God that passes all understanding, and that you would know that you are deeply loved and greatly cared for, and that there is a plan and there's a path and a purpose made just for you. And it is for your good and for hope and for a future. Do not quit.
Oh, you guys, I hope you're encouraged. I hope that encourages you. And just remember, everyone has a from grief to purpose story. And as Donna mentioned earlier, sometimes you have to experience those pain points in life that can ultimately, if you allow it to, draw you closer to God. This was our episode. Donna, thank you so much for joining me today. You're always welcome to come back on whenever you want.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a joy to get to know you and to have time with you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. You guys, this is our episode. Again, be sure to visit Donna's website if you would like to learn more about her and, partake in her coaching services. If you need it, reach out to someone. Education is necessary. Community, is necessary as well to help us grow, and heal. So DonnaWoolam.com. This is the From Grief to Purpose podcast, and we will see you next time. Bye.